everyone, my name is Cynthia. Let's talk books, and today I have a video that I hoped would be a lot shorter and that is my most disappointing books of 2019. In fact, when I sat down and looked at all of the books that I wanted to include in here, I have an even 10. So that was not planned, it so happened to be 10 books that were quite disappointing in 2019 now. Some of these books are not horrible books. They're not bad. They were just disappointing to me. I had higher expectations, and some of that is not the book's fault. It's more of a reader audience thing where I was just not the right reader or the right audience for this particular book. So let's get right into it. The first book that was really disappointing was Alice Hoffman's The Probable Future. Alice Hoffman has been a very prolific writer, and this book has a lot of magic in it, multi-generational women and family in it, and I really wanted to love it because of that premise, but it was also a book where there wasn't a whole lot of plot. There's not a lot that happens, and I thought the premise was just so promising, and it ended up not delivering on that promise. So in the end, it was just disappointing. But I think if you are less of a plot-driven reader than I am, you might get more out of it. Even then, though, I just think overall, this is not a book I recommend. I read it for my book club. Some of the other women in the book club did enjoy it more than I did. But even with that, I feel like there are better books that deal with the same themes and just do a better job of it than this particular one did. It doesn't mean that I'll never read Hoffman again. This book was just disappointing and did not live up to the expectations that I had of it. The next book is Roomies by Christina and Thorne. So this book was disappointing, even though it has a lot of really good elements. There were chunks of this book that I really enjoyed. I enjoyed the male lead, who is Irish, and the chemistry with the female lead. What I did not like was the way that the issue of immigration was handled. In the story, the central part of the story is the fact that the male lead is in the country illegally, and that he has to marry the female lead in order to stay in the country. And as someone who is an immigrant and who has kind of seen a lot of people go through that process of getting married for a green card, or getting married and then going through the process of trying to get the green card, I just know that process is much more serious and takes longer, and it wasn't handled in a way that felt genuine or that I appreciated. That does not mean, though, that this was a horrible book. A lot of people really love it. It's being made into a movie. At an event I was at the Red Bodice, Christina and Lauren both talked about how they were going to update the story and make the male lead Latinx. I don't know how I feel about that, but I don't like to prejudge things, so I'm just going to leave it at that. All right, book number 3 on the list of most disappointing books of 2019 is The Wicked Will Rise by Danielle Paige. This was a book that has been on my Audible for a really long time. It was one of, because the series was one of the first series I picked up after graduate school when I was trying to get back into reading for fun. So if you don't know, the premise is it's a retelling of The Wizard of Oz through a new girl who's from Kansas and ends up in Oz, and the kind of government that Dorothy has set up is a bad government, and it's her job to kind of come in here and fix things. So this is a series. I read the first one, ages and ages ago now, it seems. It hasn't been that long, but since grad school. And I finally got to the second book in the series this year because I had it in the audiobook. And it was just one of those things where as I'm listening to it, I'm like, why did I like the first book? I think I just liked it because it was one of the first books I was picking up for fun after graduate school, and it didn't require a whole lot of mental power, and it was revisiting, the Wizard of Oz characters, putting a new spin on it. But going back to it, I just realized I had outgrown this series and would not be continuing with it. Like, that is it. I know a lot of people really love the series, and I just outgrew it. There we go. The next book, I feel really bad putting on this list, but it was disappointing. It just was. The Gilded was by Roshani Chokshi. I thought this was a really promising book. It's a heist book with a lot of really cool, diverse characters set in 19th century Paris during the World's Fair. The way that she handles that world and puts like a fantasy twist on it is beautiful. Clearly, Chokshi understands that history and the diversity that did actually exist in Paris during this period really well. To me, it was just the heist story that didn't work, and it might be that heist books are just not for me. I'm like, I should have loved this book. The diversity, the plot-driven aspect of it, character development, but it just did not work for me. But again, I think that was an audience thing where it didn't work for me just because I was not the right audience for it. It was not a bad book by any means. I was just a little bit disappointed in it because I thought I was really going to love it because of the setting and the diversity, and I ended up not loving it. It was just okay, like good, okay, and that was it. The next book number 5 on this list is The Storm Runner by J.C. Cervantes. Another one of those books that I thought was really promising. This is a Latinx own voices books using Mayan mythology. It's a middle grade book, and 2019 was definitely the year that I got into middle grade books. So this follows a young kid who basically discovers that he is actually connected to the Mayan gods, and we follow him on his journey and adventure. There's a lot of plot in this book, so as a plot-driven reader, I really thought I was going to love it, and then I just did not. One, there's too much plot and not enough character development. Like, that to me was a huge problem. Even though I'm plot driven, there needs to be enough character development. And where that really shone through is in Sane's internalized ableism. He's got a physical disability, and the way he speaks about it is just so negatively throughout the entire book until the very end. And by that point, when there's a switch, like, there hasn't been enough character evolution to have really like earned that payoff at the end, and it just did not work for me, right? So again, it's not a terrible book. It's got some bad elements in it. It's got some great elements too, like the mythology in here is great, but it was disappointing to me. So there we go. Book number 6 on this list is Jodi Picoult's Small Great Things. I'm a little bit scared to have put this book in here too because I know a lot of people really love the author. I know a lot of people really love the book. Here's why it was disappointing. This was a book club book for me that my book club picked, and it deals with issues of racism. And so, like, I love reading that, fiction, nonfiction. I appreciate books that deal with tough subjects, but this was one of those things where I was not the right audience for it. The book is written by a white woman for other white women, and it basically explaining racism, explaining like microaggressions, and it was just not for me. I didn't appreciate certain things about it either. I didn't appreciate the way one of the characters' sisters, who is a much more, is presented as having taken on more radical political positions in terms of race, and is shown as like, I think is judged for it in the story, and I did not appreciate that in here. So this is one of those books where I'm like, if you like it, that's really great. It's just was not for me, and I don't recommend it if you are somebody who reads and thinks a lot about these kinds of issues. I think it's not for that kind of audience. All right, book number 7 on this list is 99% Mine by Sally Thorne. I think this was disappointing in part because of all the hype and how much I liked Sally Thorne's debut romance novel. So that was The Hating Game. That Hating Game, the chemistry between the between the two characters sizzled. It sizzled in a way that it did not in 99% Mine. But my bigger problem with this story was the main character's brother. It's a really, so the main female character, the main male character, and the brother all have like a long relationship. But the main female character and her brother have a toxic, codependent relationship. And the book tries to justify a lot of that toxicity at the end, and I did not appreciate it. Like, I feel like when a character is going to be redeemed, there has to be, like, they have to go through a journey where they have to earn that redemption. If it's not earned, then it's way too simple, and the message becomes like, oh, this person just needs to be forgiven because they've admitted they were wrong. It's like, no, it needs to be earned. I need to see that character go through hell and back to earn their redemption, and it was just not present here. And if you are expecting a lot of the wit and chemistry of a hating game, I don't think you're going to find it in 99% Mine. That doesn't mean that this was the worst book in the world. No, and some people really like it, and it was just not for me. The next book, book number 8, is Jane Steele by Lyndsay Faye. So this was a story that, again, this was not a horrible book. I loved aspects of this book. It's a Jane Eyre retelling. It was just disappointing to me because I really like Jane Eyre, the Jane Eyre story, although it's been a while since I've read it, and I don't know, this book just, there were parts of it that really worked and then parts of it that did not, and that's why it becomes disappointing because it was a longer book that had parts that did not work. The way that some of the kind of diversity is brought into this book felt like, oh, like that was the right approach, executed a bit off. I'll say that. There were parts that dragged. There were parts that were great. Like, I actually enjoyed the violence and the gore in this book. There's violence and gore, which I think some people will not enjoy. I had no problem with it. In fact, I enjoyed those aspects of it. But then there were long periods of like boring. And maybe I should shut up and keep going because like it was not a bad book. I just was one of those, like where I felt like I wanted this book to be so much better. I wanted to love it, and I didn't love it. And well, that was that. Book number 9 in the most disappointing list of 2019 is The Hunchback of Notre-Dame. Yeah. I really enjoyed the reading experience because of the read-along hosted by Mara over at Books Like Whoa, but this is a boring-ass book that I would never recommend to anyone. There are things in here that are useful, like I did use it in one of my classes this semester, but I warned the class, I was like, don't pick it up thinking you're going to get the Disney movie, and it's boring. That was the real problem with The Hunchback of Notre-Dame, and I wanted more out of it, but the reading experience of the read-along made up for a lot of that, so there we go. Number 10, and the last most disappointing book of 2019 was Her Other Secret by HelenKay Dimon. I like HelenKay Dimon. She was the most recent head of the Romance Writers of America Association, and I enjoyed following her on social media, so I wanted to read something by her. This is a romance thriller, and I was like, I like romance, I like thriller, check, grabbed it, and I was like, I think like 100 pages in or something. It wasn't even halfway through it, and I was finding myself forcing myself to read it, which is not good, and I found myself not caring about the characters. Like, I really didn't care what was going to happen, so I put myself out of that mystery and DNF'd it. This is one of the few books that I DNF'd in 2019, and that's why I'm putting it here. I wanted to love it. It seemed to click a lot of things that I like, a lot of boxes of things I like, and it just did not. It did not, and I don't feel bad about it. Like, reflecting on it now, I'm like, yeah, I don't need to pick it back up, and other people might really enjoy it, and that's totally fine. I just was did not do it for me as I was reading, and I'm becoming a little bit more selective and a little bit more able to just DNF books. Like, if I'm not enjoying it, if I don't care about the characters, like, I'm not going to subject myself to it, because I have a lot of other books on my TBR, books that I want to get to that are hopefully like are more enjoyable to me. And that is one of the things that I'm also taking with me into 2020. Like, this is a hobby, and I want to like it, and I don't need to be forcing myself to read books that I'm not into. So those are my 10 most disappointing books in 2019. Let me know what were your most disappointing books, because it's always good when I can I trust somebody else's opinion and I can take a book off of the TBR, or if you all tell me like a certain book was not good or disappointing, and then I can just avoid it and not add anything else to my TBR. But thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye.